zero malaria target. And as our health reporter Zaida Mohammed now reports on this special piece, a malaria vaccine discovery of 77% efficacy by the Oxford University promises to be just what the world needs in the 100% eradication quest against the life-threatening malaria disease.
This is the Simba family in their home in Kadipo village in Homa Bay County. The family of 5 share smiles as they read a scripture in their compound. But this family, like many families in this malaria-stricken county, is counting losses from the mosquito-borne disease that has been here since the 1880s. 23-year-old Cheryl Simba almost lost her life to malaria at the age of 17 when she was about 7 months pregnant. Cheryl reports feeling contraction-like symptoms and was rushed to hospital thinking she was experiencing premature labor, only to find out she had contracted malaria.
It really affected me during my pregnancy. Yeah, some years back in 2013, I was pregnant. Then before the 37 weeks of delivery, before my 9 months, I fell sick. And the first thing we suspected was like I had labor, premature labor or something. So when I was rushed to the hospital, the doctors found that I had strong malaria. And if it were not for their help, I could have lost that baby.
Cheryl is among the few pregnant women to survive a malaria diagnosis, as the disease is reported to be almost always fatal when it comes to children under the age of 5 and pregnant mothers. Cheryl, however, says her safe delivery was not the end of her experience with malaria.
Even after that delivery, I had some experience with my daughter also, because most of the time she could fall sick, rush her to the hospital even in the middle of the night, get treated, then we get back.
Goretia Tieno Simba is Cheryl's mom. She too has a story to tell. She says Cheryl's grandmother was not as lucky as her daughter, as contracting malaria sent her right to her grave.
My mother-in-law, she was sick at home and she was taking some drugs. And when the condition got worse, we took her to the hospital where she was diagnosed to be having malaria. She was given anti-malaria and we came back home. But the malaria was so severe and she could not make it. We lost her in 2019.
The Simba family is among many families globally and in the continent, barring 1 or 2 of their family members due to malaria. Dr. Nekoye Otsiula, a medical doctor and the Global Medical Affairs Director for Malaria at Novartis Pharmaceutical, says tables turned when she had to treat her own daughter with malaria, from being a doctor diagnosing malaria to a mother nursing her sick child back to health.
When my daughter had just joined nursery school, and we lived in Kisumu at that point, she contracted malaria. And she went from being completely well, we were playing and washing the car, to being completely tired. I couldn't wake her up. And of course I panicked. I ran to see my daughter's doctor. And he did some tests and found that she had malaria. And my child had to be admitted to hospital for a week. And thereafter, for a week, I had to stay at home and look after her. And so I suddenly went from this doctor who's diagnosing malaria in other people's children to this mother who's looking after my own child who now has malaria. It was very traumatizing, knowing the effect that malaria can have. Malaria is a disease that potentially can kill. And every minute, I hoped and prayed that my daughter would get better.
A According to Dr. Nekoe, malaria still remains one of the top 10 killers in the country over a century later.
Malaria remains a very important cause of outpatient visits. About 1 in 6 people who go to be seen in hospital are treated for malaria. For 2018, this translates to about 10 million people, a bit over a third of whom were confirmed to actually have malaria.
Statistics from the World Health Organization estimating that about 229 million cases of malaria have been reported worldwide, with over 409,000 deaths resulting from the mosquito-borne disease. Dr. Nekoe further says one of the biggest challenges in the country when it comes to malaria treatment is treatment without prior diagnosis.
People take all sorts of fevers to be malaria, and they go ahead and get an anti-malarial without any diagnosis. And not all fevers are malaria. And in fact, if you look at it this way, if you deny somebody with a fever, if you go ahead and treat somebody with a fever with malaria, you deny them a diagnosis. So that's one of the biggest challenges. The second thing related to the first is that when we go to the chemist and buy over-the-counter anti-malarials, we run the risk of driving resistance. And that's a serious issue in terms of malaria control, can come back and impact our ability to control malaria.
A survey conducted by the Kenya Malaria Operational Plan shows that in the year 2018, approximately 10 million people were treated for malaria in the country. Out of this, only about 4 million were confirmed cases, making up 40% of the total tally. The survey further shows malaria cases in children under the age of 5 in the same year was about 3 million, 28% of the total number of persons treated with malaria in the year 2018. She, however, says all hope is not lost as advancements in malaria treatment, such as the discovery of a malaria vaccine, shines a new ray of hope in a rather dark affair.
I think we could eradicate malaria, but it's a long-term view. The first step is to control it, to have adequate malaria control, to optimize the tools that we have right now, which include insecticide-treated bed nets, include appropriate diagnosis, preventive malaria drugs for pregnant women and for children under the age of 5, proper case management and treatment with proper quality-assured drugs. The second step would be then to innovate, to see what else we could do. And right now we have a malaria vaccine pilot ongoing, which would generate data, and we look forward to seeing how that impacts malaria control.
Oxford scientists behind the COVID-19 AstraZeneca vaccine being the minds behind one of the first malaria vaccine to reach a World Health Organization goal of a malaria shot with at least 75% efficacy. Adrian Hill, director of Oxford's Jenner Institute and a lead scientist in the discovery, says the vaccine could potentially have a major public impact should it prove successful on all subsequent trials.
77% is the highest yet and could really add to the existing tools that we use to control malaria, meaning bed nets, insecticide spraying, and giving children drugs to kill the malaria parasite during the peak of the transmission season. The problem is that we're using all those tools today and have been for some years. And since about 2015, there has been no reduction in the overall mortality from malaria in Africa each year. So we're a little bit stuck. Therefore, we need some new tools, and the malaria vaccine would be a fantastic one to have.
The vaccine was tried in about 450 children in Burkina Faso and was found to be safe and showed high-level efficacy over 12 months of its follow-up.
5 different locations in Africa in 4 countries, Kenya, Tanzania, Burkina Faso, and Mali, vaccinate young children again, this time 5 to 36 months of age. There'll be almost 5,000 subjects in the trial, and we will follow those for some time, vaccinating them against malaria, or in some cases with a control vaccine, and asking how protective the vaccine is, but very importantly, monitoring those thousands of subjects for safety.
According to Dr. Hill, malaria complete eradication by the vaccine is still far from achievable, but it cannot be ruled out completely in a few years to come.
A single component vaccine. Our overall program at Oxford is aiming to produce a multi-component vaccine. That won't be ready in the next year or two, but eventually we may be able to improve that efficacy level of 77% right up into the 90s if we can add some more components. But it's really only then you might even begin to think about stopping using other interventions.
As the world marks Malaria Day today, the discovery of a malaria vaccine with a 77% efficacy is not only huge, but a promise that the victory in the war against malaria may just be around the corner. Zainab Mohammed, TV47, Nairobi.